You clerked for Justice Thomas on the Supreme Court. You also testified before this committee against the Supreme Court ethics reform legislation at a hearing in June of 2023. That hearing followed investigative reporting that revealed Justice Clarence Thomas received and failed to disclose gifts worth millions of dollars, with some estimates placing the total value at over $4 million. This was confirmed by exhaustive committee investigation and subpoenas that my staff and I conducted when I was chairman of the committee. So I have several questions I'd like to ask you. First, if you are confirmed to serve on the Third Circuit, will you commit to abiding by all the rules and regulations governing judicial ethics, including federal statutes and the Code of Conduct for U.S. judges?
Look, this back and forth between Senator Dick Durbin and judicial nominee Jennifer L. Mascott during that Senate Judiciary Committee hearing isn't just some dry procedural stuff. It's a window into the ongoing battles over ethics, accountability, and the future of our courts. As the ranking member of the committee, yep, Durbin's still holding that spot in 2025, even as he's announced his retirement after this term. Durbin grilled Mascott on her past ties to Justice Clarence Thomas and her opposition to Supreme Court ethics reforms. Mascott, a law prof and former Thomas clerk nominated by President Trump for the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, played it cool and defensive. Let's unpack the significance of this dust up and wrap up with some key conclusions.
Oh, Senator, absolutely. I would be committed to all ethics requirements. Yes, Senator.
I'm going to assume, unless you say otherwise, that you had no personal knowledge of Clarence Thomas's receiving any gifts.
Senator, of course, that is correct. I was his law clerk. Yes.
All right. You came before this committee to testify on an effort we're making to try to establish a code of ethics for the highest court in the land. We know that there is a code of ethics that applies to federal judges other than the Supreme Court and how it is enforced. And we're trying to write something that would apply to Supreme Court Justice Thomas or any others who have millions of dollars worth of undisclosed gifts. Since you came and testified against our legislation, I'll ask you a very general question. How do you believe the Supreme Court should be governed when it comes to ethics?
Well, so Senator, I was grateful to have the opportunity to come here back at that time during a challenging time. Just on your earlier questions, I just need to say again how honored I was to serve as a law clerk for Justice Thomas and have the deepest respect for him and his character and his integrity. I appreciate your question about Senator Whitehouse's proposed legislation at that time. In my recollection of my testimony on that act, and I think I may have been the only Republican witness in the committee testifying that day. I could be wrong about that, but that we were talking about the various constitutional or not aspects of the bill, and that my testimony focused not really on policy questions of ethics, but some of the particulars in the act, like the lower court panels sitting to evaluate recusal decisions of Supreme Court justices, and that I was pointing out that in our system that has the Supreme Court vested with judicial authority at the top of Article 3, that there were real constitutional questions about allowing inferior judges, is referred to in the Constitution, inferior courts, to sit in judgment really of any decisions of the Supreme Court, and that there were also a lot of open questions in our system about the way that ethics decisions should be adjudicated. But I do not recall commenting on the policy of the justice's decision to file recusals. And again, my understanding is that even though it's not covered statutorily in quite the same way as lower courts, that the Supreme Court, by its own statements and commitments, upholds the statutory recusal requirements in exactly the same way and with the same rigor that lower courts do.
So when it comes to constitutional compliance, do you believe that receiving millions of dollars in gifts and not disclosing them is in the best interest of our Constitution?
Well, Senator, again, and I don't mean to comment first on the premise of the question. My recollection is that all reporting requirements there were dealt with and addressed. And the constitutional question, again, I think the provisions in the bill, as I recall, that were the focus of my testimony, are about how these types of requirements are to be enforced. And the Supreme Court, as I recall, I think a statement by Chief Justice Roberts at the time, again, emphasized how devoted the Supreme Court and every justice is to complying with ethics requirements. The main constitutional and legal questions before the committee that day were which actors in our system are responsible for making sure those agreements are followed, and questions about how two co-equal branches are to interact and how lower court judges interact with superior court judges.
Why this matters beyond the hearing room, first off, this isn't isolated. It's part of a bigger fight over Supreme Court ethics that's been simmering since those bombshell reports on Thomas's undisclosed gifts, totaling over $4 million. Durbin, a longtime Illinois Democrat, who's been on the Judiciary Committee for over 2 decades, used his role as ranking member to spotlight these issues. He's basically saying, hey, if we're confirming judges like you who defended the status quo, what does that say about fixing the mess at the top? It's a smart move politically, especially with Democrats in the minority now. It keeps the pressure on Republican-led reforms, or lack thereof, and rallies the base on judicial integrity. For Mascot, the stakes are personal and professional. She's got 0 ties to Delaware, the seat she's nominated for, which already drew flack from Democrats during her September 3, 2025 hearing. But tying her back to that 2023 testimony against ethics bills, that's Durbin trying to paint her as too cozy with Thomas and the conservative wing of the court. Her responses, dodging the gift specifics and pivoting to constitutional concerns like lower courts judging Supremes, show a classic nominee strategy. Stay neutral, respect the boss, Thomas, and stick to legal wonkery. It highlights how nominees navigate these partisan minefields, especially under a Trump administration pushing through picks like hers amid ongoing vacancies. On a broader level, this exchange underscores the deep divides in American politics over the judiciary. With the Supreme Court facing historic low approval ratings due to ethics scandals, Durbin's push amplifies calls for transparency. It's not just about Thomas. It's about whether Congress can, or should, reign in the highest court without violating separation of powers. Mascot's defense, that the court self-regulates just fine, echoes conservative arguments for judicial independence, but it risks looking tone-deaf in the post-January 6 world where trust in institution is tanking. And with her nomination still pending as of September 2025, this could swing votes in the Senate, where Republicans hold the majority but confirmations can get dicey. Ultimately, this isn't resolving the bigger problems. It's just highlighting them. Until Congress passes real reforms, or the court steps up its game, we're stuck in this loop of hearings and headlines. If anything, it reminds us that who sits on the bench matters big time for democracy, and these nomination fights are where the rubber meets the road. Keep an eye on her confirmation vote. It could tell us a lot about where the Senate's headed in this polarized era.